Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. That night started like any other. The house was quiet, the clock in the hallway ticking loud enough to remind me how late it was. I was just getting ready for bed when I realized my son hadn't come downstairs yet. His light was still on. It wasn't unusual for him to stay up late, he'd always been the type to lose track of time. But something about the silence that night felt different. It was the kind of stillness that makes your chest tighten, even before you know why. I hesitated at his door. My hand was already on the knob when I heard it, a soft sound, almost like a whisper, followed by the faint creak of the floorboards. My heart started beating faster. Maybe he was on the phone, maybe watching something. I didn't want to intrude, but instinct pushed me to check anyway. When I opened the door just a little, the warm light from his room spilled into the hallway. What I saw in that moment froze me completely. My breath caught in my throat, my body went cold. It wasn't what any mother expects to see, not ever. And yet there I was, staring, unable to move or speak. It wasn't wrong, exactly, but it wasn't something I could ever unsee. The way he looked up at me, his eyes full of shock, fear, and something deeper, made my heart ache. I wanted to say something, anything, but words refused to come. There was this heavy pause between us, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Everything I thought I knew about him, about us, shifted in that single second. I closed the door quietly, my hands trembling. The hallway felt endless as I walked back to my room, my thoughts spinning in circles. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying that moment, asking questions I didn't have the courage to answer. Was it just a mistake? Was there something he'd been hiding all along? Or had I simply refused to see what was right in front of me? The next morning, when I saw him at the breakfast table, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The silence between us said more than any words could. I could tell he knew that I knew. But neither of us spoke. Not yet. Because how do you even begin to talk about something that changed everything in one glance? Even now, I keep wondering, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have walked away quietly like I did, or confronted it head-on? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. And if you think you can handle what happened next, what I discovered when I finally asked him the truth, stay tuned for part 2. Because that's when the real story begins. What I thought was a single, shocking moment, turned out to be only the beginning of something much deeper, something that would test the limits of love, trust, and everything I believed about family. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. We moved around the house like strangers sharing the same space, careful not to cross paths too often. Every time I heard his footsteps, I found myself listening, wondering what he was thinking, wondering if he was pretending everything was fine or if his heart was racing the way mine was. The air between us had changed. There was a new kind of tension, one I couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. He'd always been close to me, more open than most kids his age. We used to talk about everything, his college plans, his friends, even his heartbreaks. But after that night, all those conversations disappeared into silence. The connection we once had now felt fragile, like glass ready to break if either of us said the wrong thing. One evening, I found him in the kitchen, standing by the window, staring out into the dark. The light above him was soft, outlining his face in a way that caught me off guard. He looked older somehow, like the boy I knew had quietly turned into someone else. For a moment, I just watched, remembering the little kid who used to run to me after bad dreams. When did everything change? When did he stop needing me? He noticed me watching and gave a small smile, hesitant, unsure. It was the first time our eyes had met since that night. Something unspoken passed between us, something too heavy for words. I wanted to ask if he was okay, but the question felt too simple for everything we were both feeling. So instead, I asked if he'd eaten. He laughed softly, like he understood what I was really trying to say. We sat down together, both pretending it was just another normal night. But every glance, every quiet pause, said otherwise. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, and when I looked up, he'd look away quickly. Maybe it was just my imagination, but there was something there, something that made my pulse quicken and my thoughts run wild. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying that kitchen moment, the way his smile felt both distant and familiar. I didn't know what scared me more, what I'd seen that night, or what I was starting to feel now. There's a line between love and something else entirely, and I wasn't sure where we stood anymore. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. Maybe it was just guilt. Or maybe, deep down, it was something neither of us wanted to admit. I know what most people would say. I know how this sounds. But sometimes, life doesn't fit neatly into what's right or wrong, it just happens, and you're left trying to make sense of it. The days kept passing, but that unspoken weight between us only grew heavier. Every small moment, passing each other in the hallway, sitting across the table, sharing a quiet breakfast, felt charged with something neither of us dared to name. The silence had its own language now. A glance could say more than words ever could, and that scared me. One afternoon, I found myself standing by his door again, just like that night. I almost knocked, but stopped when I heard his voice, soft, almost trembling. He was talking to someone on the phone. I could only catch bits and pieces, but the tone was clear, confused, emotional, almost guilty. I stepped back quietly, not wanting to intrude again. But my heart started racing. Who was he talking to? Was it about that night? About me? Later, when we finally crossed paths in the living room, his eyes looked tired. There was something in them I hadn't noticed before, fear mixed with something else, something that looked a lot like sadness. I asked if everything was okay. He hesitated, then said, "I just need time." His voice cracked slightly, and that was enough for me to know that whatever was happening inside him, it wasn't simple. I tried to distract myself, to act normal, but every room in the house carried a memory. The laughter, the shared dinners, the movie nights, it all felt like echoes from another life. Now, even the smallest moment between us felt layered with questions. Was he trying to distance himself? Or was he silently hoping I'd reach out first? That night, I sat by my window, thinking about everything. Maybe the conflict wasn't between us, it was within us. Between what we felt and what we thought we were supposed to feel. Between love that's pure and love that blurs the lines. I didn't know which one this was anymore. The next morning, I decided to talk to him. But when I went to his room, it was empty. His bed was unmade, his backpack gone. My chest tightened as I saw a note on his desk, just one line, "I need space." I didn't know where he went or for how long. But I knew that moment was a turning point. The house felt hollow without him, like a part of me had walked out too. Maybe this was what needed to happen. Maybe distance would bring clarity, or make everything even more complicated. Now, I can't stop wondering, did he leave to escape me, or to protect me from something he couldn't explain? The house didn't feel like home anymore after he left. Every sound echoed differently, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the creak of the floorboards seemed louder without him there. Nights were the worst. I kept thinking I'd hear his footsteps or his voice calling out, but it never happened. His absence became its own kind of presence, haunting every corner of the house. A week passed before I heard anything. One evening, just as I was about to turn off the porch light, my phone buzzed. It was a message from him. Only 3 words, "I'm coming back." My heart skipped. Relief mixed with something darker, fear, maybe, or uncertainty. Why now? Where had he been? When he finally came home, I could tell something had changed. He looked different, not just tired, but guarded. His eyes carried a distance I hadn't seen before. I tried to smile, to pretend I wasn't nervous, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. He set his bag down quietly and said, "We need to talk." Those words hung heavy in the air. We sat in the living room, the same place where so many quiet moments had turned into silence. The only light came from the small lamp beside us, casting long shadows on the walls. I waited for him to speak, but when he finally did, his voice was low and uncertain. "That night," he said, "I didn't mean for you to see anything. But maybe it was meant to happen." I froze. The way he said it, it wasn't just about what I saw, it was about something deeper. Something he'd been holding back. My throat went dry, my pulse racing. He looked right at me then, eyes full of conflict, pain, and something else I couldn't name. "I've been trying to figure out what it meant," he continued. "Why it felt like everything changed after that night. Why I couldn't stop thinking about it, or about you." My heart started pounding so loud I could barely hear him. It was like time had slowed down, trapping us both in that moment. Everything in me wanted to move, to say something, but I couldn't. The air between us was thick, charged with unspoken truth. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, a noise came from upstairs, a sharp thud that broke the silence. We both turned at the same time, startled. The sound came again, heavier this time, like footsteps. He stood up quickly, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, feeling a chill crawl down my spine. The lights flickered once, then steadied. We stared toward the staircase, the air heavy with tension. Whatever was waiting up there felt like it was about to change everything all over again. The moment the sound echoed again, deeper and closer this time, we both froze. My heartbeat felt like thunder in my ears. He took a hesitant step toward the stairs, glancing back at me as if to make sure I was still there. I nodded, though every instinct in me screamed to stop him. The air in the house had shifted, thicker, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. We moved slowly, one step at a time, the creaking of the wooden floor mixing with the soft hum of the night outside. When we reached the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before us, dim and silent. Every door was slightly open, just enough to make the shadows dance with the flickering light from below. He whispered, "Stay here," but I couldn't. Something in me wouldn't let him face it alone. We both turned toward his room first. The door was half open, the light still on inside. When we entered, everything looked the same, until I noticed the window. It was wide open, the curtains fluttering against the cold air. But it wasn't the wind that made my breath catch. There, on his desk, lay a small photograph I'd never seen before. It was an old picture, me, holding him as a child, but behind us stood a man I didn't recognize. His arm was around me, smiling. I felt dizzy for a moment. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He looked just as confused. "I found it last week," he said quietly. "It was in one of Dad's old boxes. I didn't know who he was, but I think he's connected to what you saw that night." His words hit me like ice. That night, the night that changed everything, suddenly felt like part of something much bigger. Maybe the truth wasn't just about what I saw, but about what had been hidden for years. I tried to speak, but before I could, another sound came from downstairs. A door slamming. We both turned toward the stairs, hearts pounding. He grabbed my hand without thinking, and for a brief second, the warmth of his touch steadied me. It felt wrong to find comfort in that moment, but I couldn't help it. The fear, the confusion, the closeness, it all tangled together until I couldn't tell one feeling from another. We went back down slowly, each step heavier than the last. When we reached the living room, the front door was wide open. The cold wind blew in, scattering the papers on the table. Then, lying among them, we saw another note, this one written in rushed, uneven handwriting. It read, "You're not supposed to be here tonight. Leave now." I felt my stomach twist. He looked at me, his face pale. "Who would write that?" he whispered. But I had no answer. I only knew one thing, someone knew what had happened that night. Someone was watching us. The tension between us grew stronger, not just from fear, but from something deeper, something that had been building since that first night. He didn't let go of my hand, and for a moment, neither of us wanted to. Whatever secret that photo held, whatever truth waited behind that warning, it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about us, and the storm that was finally catching up. The wind rushed through the open door, carrying with it a faint echo, like someone had just been there moments before. My heart pounded as I stepped closer, the note still trembling in my hand. He followed, his eyes darting across the dark yard outside, scanning for movement. Everything felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, something glinting near the porch light. A key. An old, rusted key tied with a faded red ribbon. I picked it up, feeling a chill race through me. He stared at it too, his brow furrowed. "That's from the basement," he said slowly. "Dad always kept it locked." The basement. A place neither of us had entered since the night my husband left years ago. I hesitated, but he reached for my hand again. "We need to know," he said, voice steady but trembling underneath. Together, we moved toward the door at the end of the hallway, the one that led downstairs. The lock clicked open easily, almost like it had been waiting. The smell of dust and old wood hit us as we stepped down into the dim light. At first, everything looked ordinary: boxes, old furniture, forgotten memories. But then we saw the same photograph again, only this time, there were dozens of copies pinned to the wall. Me. Him. And that same man. My breath caught as realization began to form. I traced the edge of one photo, noticing faint handwriting on the back. It wasn't just a date, it was a name. The same as my son's. The same man standing behind me in the picture. My husband had kept them all hidden. He turned to me, his face pale. "What does this mean?" he asked quietly. And then it hit me, the night I walked in on him, the guilt, the distance, the way everything changed. It wasn't shame I saw in his eyes that night. It was fear. Before I could speak, we heard footsteps above us. Slow, deliberate. Someone was inside the house again. We froze. Then, a familiar voice called from upstairs, low, calm, chilling. "You shouldn't have come down there." It was him. My husband. The one we thought had vanished years ago. He appeared at the top of the stairs, older, worn, but unmistakably alive. "I had to protect you from the truth," he said, his voice breaking. "He's not who you think he is." My son stepped forward, confusion written all over his face. "What are you talking about?" The truth came out like a blade. "You're not my son," my husband whispered. "You're his." The world tilted for a moment. My knees went weak as everything I'd believed collapsed. My son looked at me then, searching, betrayed, lost. The silence that followed was unbearable. And just as I tried to reach for him, the lights flickered and went out. That was when everything truly began to unravel. The darkness swallowed the room for only a moment, but it felt endless. When the lights flickered back on, my husband, was gone. Only the echo of his voice lingered in the air, mixed with the heavy silence between us. My son stood motionless, eyes wide with disbelief. The truth had shattered everything: our memories, our bond, the life we thought we understood. I walked toward him slowly, my heart aching with every step. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear, I didn't know." Tears blurred my vision, but I could still see the pain in his face, the kind that went deeper than words. He looked away, his hands trembling. Then why did it all feel like a lie? There was no answer good enough for that question. I told him everything: the years of secrets, the missing pieces, how his father's disappearance had never made sense. Maybe, deep down, we were both victims of someone else's choices. Maybe love had just gotten lost between truth and silence. When morning came, the house felt different again, lighter somehow. He packed a small bag, said he needed to find out the truth for himself. I didn't stop him this time. I just stood by the door, watching him leave, praying that someday he'd come back, not as someone broken by secrets, but as someone free from them. As the door closed behind him, I looked around the empty house and realized something important. Sometimes, love doesn't end with understanding, it ends with acceptance. We can't change what's been done, but we can choose what happens next. And maybe, that's what this story was always about. Not about loss, or secrets, but about learning to let go of the pain that keeps us tied to the past. What would you have done if you were in my place? Could you forgive the lies if love was still there? Tell me what you think in the comments, and let me know if you want to see what happens next, because maybe this story isn't over yet.